They didn't know who was sitting across the courtroom. They didn't know that the woman they were trying to destroy had spent 15 years preparing for exactly this kind of moment. Not for them, not for revenge, but because life had taught her that the only way to survive was to become someone no one could throw away again. Let me take you back to where it started. I was 22 years old, 3 months out of college, and I had just landed what I thought was my dream job. Hargrove & Callum Financial Group, a mid-sized investment firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was the youngest analyst they had hired that year, and I walked through those glass doors on my first Monday morning feeling like I had finally earned my place in the world. My supervisor was a man named Director Whitfield, broad shoulders, silver hair, the kind of man who shook hands like he was trying to prove something. He welcomed me with a firm grip and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I told myself I was imagining it. For 2 years, I worked harder than anyone else on that floor. I came in early. I stayed late. I built models, ran projections, caught errors that saved clients hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was good at my job, and I knew it. More importantly, my clients knew it. That was the problem. Director Whitfield had a particular way of operating. He liked being the smartest person in the room. He liked credit. And he liked women who smiled and nodded and did not outperform him in front of the senior partners. I did not understand that unwritten rule until it was too late. The morning I found out I was pregnant, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could make myself walk inside. My boyfriend at the time, a man named Marcus, had been kind when I told him. He said the right things. He held my hand. But 3 weeks later, he sat across from me at a dinner table and told me quietly that he was not ready for this, that he was sorry, and that he hoped I understood. I understood that I was on my own. I was 24 years old, single, 7 weeks pregnant, and terrified. I did not tell anyone at work for as long as I could. I wore blazers that ran a little large. I scheduled my morning sickness around my early meetings. I kept performing because I had no other choice. I had rent to pay and no safety net to fall back on. My parents had passed within 2 years of each other while I was in college, and the only family I had left was my aunt in Raleigh, a retired school teacher named Aunt Cecile, who had helped me through school on a fixed income and could not take on more. By the time I was 4 months along and no longer able to hide it, I walked into Director Whitfield's office and closed the door behind me. I told him calmly and professionally. I said I had every intention of continuing to perform at the highest level. I said I had a plan for maternity leave. I said I was not asking for anything special, only what I was legally entitled to. He nodded slowly. He said he appreciated me telling him. He said the firm would of course follow all applicable policies. He smiled that smile again. 6 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with Director Whitfield and the head of HR, a woman named Patricia who wore the same pearl earrings every single day. They told me the firm was restructuring my division. They told me my position was being eliminated. They handed me a folder with a severance offer and a non-disclosure agreement and told me I had 2 weeks to decide. I sat there and looked at that folder and I thought about everything I had built in that office over 2 years. I thought about the clients who requested me by name. I thought about the late nights and the early mornings and the presentations I had saved from falling apart at the last minute. And then I thought about the baby growing inside me and the rent due on the first of the month. And I signed nothing. I stood up, picked up my bag, thanked them for their time, and walked out. I filed a complaint with the EEOC the next morning. I hired an employment attorney named Mr. Davenport who worked on contingency because I had almost nothing in savings. He was a quiet man with reading glasses on a chain around his neck and a file cabinet that looked like it might collapse at any moment, and he was the best advocate I ever had. He told me my case was solid but slow. He told me these things could take years. He told me to be patient and to document everything. I had a baby to feed. I could not simply be patient. I found part-time work doing bookkeeping for small businesses. I stretched every dollar until it begged for mercy. Aunt Cecile drove up from Raleigh when my daughter was born and stayed for 3 weeks, sleeping on my pull-out couch, cooking food I could freeze. doing laundry while I learned what it meant to be a mother. My daughter's name is Nora. She came into the world screaming like she had something to prove, and I looked at her face and made her a promise I intended to keep. I would build something. I did not know exactly what yet, but I would build something that could not be taken from me. The lawsuit dragged on. 14 months after I was let go, Hargrove and Callum offered a settlement. Mr. Davenport told me it was reasonable given the uncertainty of litigation. I took it, signed the NDA on the portions they required, and moved forward. It was not justice. It was a door closing. I let it close. What I did with that money was the first real decision I made entirely on my terms. I did not use it for rent. I did not use it for a new car. I enrolled in a night program at UNC Charlotte to begin working toward my MBA, and I kept doing bookkeeping during the day to cover expenses. Nora stayed with Aunt Cecile 3 nights a week. I drove 40 minutes each way, twice a week, to sit in a classroom that smelled like coffee and dry erase markers and learn everything I could. It took me 4 years. Nora learned to walk while I was studying financial ethics. She said her first full sentence the semester I finished my thesis. On graduation day, she sat in the audience in a yellow dress that Aunt Cecile had bought her, and when I walked across that stage, she clapped so hard I could hear her above everyone else. I want to tell you about the next few years the way they actually felt, which was not triumphant in any movie sense. It was slow and unglamorous. I got a job at a smaller firm doing compliance work. I was underpaid and I knew it. I worked anyway. I built a reputation as someone meticulous, trustworthy, and calm under pressure. I moved to a better firm, then a better one. I developed a specialty in regulatory compliance for financial institutions, which sounds dry but is in fact extraordinarily important work, because when compliance fails, people lose their savings and their retirements and their entire futures. I cared about it because I understood what it felt like to be financially vulnerable with no one coming to help. By the time Nora was in middle school, I was a senior compliance director. By the time she started high school, I had been recruited to lead the compliance division at a firm called Meridian Wealth Partners, one of the larger independent wealth management companies in the Southeast. My title was Chief Compliance Officer. My office had a window. I had a team of 12 people who reported to me, and I ran a department that touched every corner of the company's operations. I did not announce this to the world. I did not post about it. I just did the work. That had always been enough for me. Nora turned 15 this spring. Everything changed. I was at my desk on a Thursday morning when my assistant knocked and told me a new consulting firm was onboarding as a vendor and that the introductory meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. It happened regularly. I did not think anything of it. I was reviewing a quarterly report when the meeting started and 2 people walked into the conference room. I looked up when the assistant introduced them, and the world went briefly sideways. The man who walked in with his hand extended and a practiced professional smile on his face was Director Whitfield. He was older. The silver hair had thinned, but the handshake was exactly the same. He did not recognize me at first. That became clear in the first 30 seconds. He introduced himself and his associate, explained their firm's services, made a small joke that nobody laughed at. I sat at the head of the table and watched him the way you watch something you have studied for a very long time. It took him about 4 minutes. I saw the moment it happened. His eyes moved to the nameplate on the table in front of me, which read, C. Merritt, Chief Compliance Officer. I watched him look at it. I watched him look at me. I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes as he matched the name to the face to the memory. I did not change my expression. He recovered quickly, I will give him that. He finished his presentation with only a slight unevenness in his voice. When it was over, I thanked him for his time. I told him our team would review the proposal and be in touch within the standard 2-week window. I shook his hand at the door, looked him directly in the eye, and said it was good to meet him. That evening I called Aunt Cecile and told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Baby, you just sit with that for a minute. You don't have to do anything with it." She was right. I sat with it. Here is what I did with it. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel. I reviewed his firm's proposal with the same rigor I applied to every vendor. The proposal had significant gaps in their liability structure and their references did not fully check out. I wrote my assessment honestly and completely. My team voted unanimously to decline. I sent the standard rejection letter. I did not orchestrate it. I did not need to. I simply did my job. The same job I had always done, and the math did not work out in his favor. That was enough. But that is not the story that finally broke something open inside me. That came about 8 months later. Our firm was involved in a regulatory review by the State Financial Oversight Board. It was routine, the kind of review that happens every few years, and my team had prepared thoroughly. I was scheduled to meet with the reviewing officer the following Tuesday. I walked into that conference room with my documentation binders and my laptop and my team behind me, and sitting across the table representing the oversight board was a woman I had not seen in 12 years. Patricia. Pearl earrings and all. She had moved into government work, apparently. She was the senior examiner on the review. She recognized me immediately. I could see it in the way her posture shifted, in the half-second of stillness before she spoke. She said, "Ms. Merritt, thank you for having us." I said, "Thank you for being here. We're fully prepared." The review took 3 days. My documentation was airtight. My team answered every question completely and correctly. On the final day, Patricia pulled me aside before she left. She stood there for a moment like she was deciding something. Then she said she had always known that the restructuring had not been handled correctly. She said she had told Director Whitfield at the time that she had concerns. She said she had been young and that she had not pushed hard enough. She said she was sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the folder with the severance papers. I thought about Nora in the parking lot of my old apartment, learning to ride a bike on the cracked asphalt because we could not afford the Park District membership. I thought about every single 6 a.m. morning and every exam taken on 3 hours of sleep and every time I had told my daughter that we were going to be okay when I was not entirely sure we were. I said, "I appreciate you saying that." And I meant it, not because it erased anything, it did not, but because she said it anyway when she did not have to, and that told me something about who she had become in those 12 years. The review closed with a clean report. My team celebrated with lunch from the taco place down the street. I sat at my desk afterward and looked out my window at the Charlotte skyline and felt something I had been carrying for a very long time begin, slowly, to loosen. That evening, I drove to the small cemetery in Concord where Aunt Cecile had been buried the previous winter. She had gone quietly, the way she had lived, without fuss, without complaint, with great dignity. A stroke in her sleep. The doctor said she had not suffered. I sat beside her grave for a long time. The light was going orange, and the air smelled like cut grass. I told her about Patricia. I told her about Director Whitfield. I told her that Nora had gotten into the honors program at her school and that she was reading novels now, thick ones, the way Aunt Cecile always had. I told her that I had built something, that it was still standing, that no one had been able to take it away. I want to tell you something I have never said out loud in quite this way, and I want you to hear it clearly. There was a morning, about 3 weeks after I was let go from Hargrove and Callum, when Nora was not yet born and my savings were almost gone, and I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and I could not see any version of the future that was going to be okay. I could not see the MBA or the compliance career or the office with the window. I could not see any of it. I could only see the immediate weight of what had been done to me and the immediate reality of what I was facing alone. What got me off that bed was not confidence. It was not a motivational quote. It was the thought of the baby who had not chosen any of this and who needed me to get up and figure it out. So I got up. I got up every morning after that. Some mornings it was harder than others. Some years were harder than others. But I got up and I did the next thing and then the next thing after that. And 15 years later, I was sitting at the head of a conference table when the man who fired me walked in and did not recognize me. He did not recognize me because people like him never really see people like me. Not when they fire us. Not when they hand us the folder. Not when they walk away. That is their loss. And I mean that without bitterness, though it took me years to arrive at a place where I could mean it without bitterness. Director Whitfield's firm never got another meeting with us. I heard through industry contacts that he retired about a year after our encounter. I do not know what he thinks about, if he thinks about me at all. What I know is this: Nora is 17 now, and she wants to study law. She told me recently that watching how I handled things over the years made her want to understand how systems work, how they fail people, and how to fix them. I sat across from her at our kitchen table, and I thought about a 24-year-old woman sitting in a parking garage who did not know yet whether she was going to be okay. She was going to be okay. Aunt Cecile used to say that the people who try to diminish you are only ever showing you the size of their own vision. They can only see as far as they can see. Your job is not to shrink down to fit inside that vision. Your job is to build something so much larger than what they imagined for you that they cannot even find you anymore. I found a card she had written me when Nora was born. I keep it in my desk drawer. It says, in her handwriting, small, careful, the penmanship of a woman who taught 4th grade for 31 years. She is here. Now you have 2 reasons. Go. I went. I am still going. And the woman who handed me a severance folder with a smile she had practiced in a mirror said she was sorry, 12 years too late, and meant it. And the man who restructured me out of a job did not recognize my face until it was sitting at the head of his next client's conference table. And none of that fixed the years in the middle. None of that gave me back the mornings. I cried in the car before walking into whatever job I was working that season. None of that gave Nora a father, or gave me a partner, or made the hard years less hard. But I am the one still standing. I am the one who built the thing. That is not a small thing. That is everything. If you are in the middle of it right now, the parking garage moment, the dark bedroom moment, the folder on the table moment, I want you to hear this. The people handing you that folder cannot see what comes next. They are not equipped to. You are the only one who gets to decide what comes next, and you get to decide it one morning at a time. Get up. Do the next thing. I'm so glad I did.